My name is Fran. I am a hand spinner, natural dyer, knitter and toy maker. I also live with a chronic illness called ME. I was born and raised on the south coast of Britain, but have been living in France for almost 10 years now. I live with my French husband and our bilingual son in central Finistère on the western edge of Brittany. Woollen Hearted is the name I finally settled upon for my little home studio and all that is created within its stone walls. In those snatched, quiet moments between homemaking and mothering a growing toddler, it is here in this sunny little room overlooking the vegetable garden that I pursue a variety of heritage fibre crafts at an intentionally slow pace. Woollen Hearted is also the name for this little journal. It's a place for me to catch my breath and gather my thoughts, to talk about my making and to delight in slow and sustainable creativity with wool that has been grown, gathered and crafted in these Breton hills. Welcome to the Woollen Hearted Podcast. Hello, you're joining me at my wheel today. It's been about a month, possibly 6 weeks since I last did any spinning, and I've really missed it. It feels really good to be back at the wheel and to have a project on my bobbins. The last thing to come off my bobbins was the yarn that eventually became the shawl that I'm wearing, which is the perpendicular shawl, a knitting pattern that was published in Pom Pom magazine. And I spun it up from the entire fleece of a tiny Western sheep, which is one of the 3 native breed sheep in Brittany. The fleece I had got from a local rare breed farm. Went to the shearing as a family in mid-April, and the chef had very kindly sheared one of his creamy Wesson ewes because I fell in love with the fleece on her back. That same night I put it on to soak in a tub of hot soapy water out in the garden. I soaked it overnight, gave it a good rinse the next day and then let it dry. It was a very hot week. And then I carded the fleece on my drum carder. From that carded bat I spun singles yarn. I didn't ply this one intentionally because I knew that this project was primarily composed of garter stitch and a beautiful lace panel down the middle. And I know that both those elements respond really well to being knitted in a singles yarn. There's no problem with bias or the yarn leaning because of the twist energy that's been put into the yarn during the spinning process. And when I had spun the entire fleece, or actually I began before I'd finished spinning, I cast on this project and I knit myself this shawl. So there was an amusing couple of days where I thought I was going to run out of yarn right in the middle of the project, but unlike your usual
game of yarn chicken, I knew I was going to be able to just spin up some more. So I spun the entire usable parts of the fleece. When you card any raw fibre, there's always a lot of waste. There's parts of the fleece that you don't want to use, generally around the bottom, the legs of the animal, so that gets skirted off right at the start. And then there's also a little bit of waste whilst carding, whether on the drum carder or on the hand cards, because inevitably a fleece is not uniform all the way across. There's areas that are shorter because they've perhaps been twice cut during the shearing process, or there's just areas which become a little bit matted, or when you come across them they're matted, or they're very dirty, or they're perhaps full of seeds or bits of grass or hay, and that was the case with this fleece. Just moving my spinning above, and now joining up the fibre again. It was rather thrilling to work on this shawl project, because not only was it a sheep to shawl or a sheep to skeins to shawl project, it also ended up being a single sheep project. I managed to knit the entire project with one fleece of yarn, and I found that quite exciting as a spinner. Just show you my shawl. So it's a beautiful perpendicular shaped shawl that you knit from end to end, and it has the interesting feature that you change direction in your garter stitch as you're knitting. So you cast on at this end, knit backwards and forwards increasing, you then turn your work and knit a lace pattern up the top. This is the gorgeous lace pattern, and at the same time you're increasing your stitches along the top. When you reach the top of the lace, you then cast off the last few stitches, and then you're just working on this final wing, and it has the really rather satisfying benefit of allowing you to end up with just 4 stitches on the needles or something like that. So I'm really pleased with this shawl. I've been wearing it ever such a lot since I finished it on chilly days like today, but of course I actually made it for my wedding. So the first time I wore it was on my wedding day, which was rather thrilling to have wool from head to toe for my wedding.
At my heart, I'm a maker, and at the heart of my making is wool. Wool flows through my fingers time after time after time again, turning from dirty, greasy fleece into yarn. With each turn of the wheel, click of the needles, seam of my sewing, the red thread running through it all is woolen. By its very nature, wool is a slow affair. Wool takes a year for a sheep to grow, and for a hand spinner like me, sometimes just as long to carefully prepare and take the raw fibre from fleece into yarn. Wool, therefore, is the ultimate slow material. And for those of us like me, for whom chronic illness or other circumstances of life enforce a quiet and reduced pace on our lives, wool and the ways we can work with it seem to make them natural companions. Working slowly with wool in this way allows me to maintain a connection with a sense of myself, that part of me that stretches beyond chronic illness and its debilitating and devastating limitations. In those moments when circumstances bring my life to a standstill and I am overwhelmed by the sensation that nothing is happening, I return to my knitting and my spinning and my sewing, and I know that things are always moving forward. Treadle after treadle, row after row, stitch after stitch, inch after slow inch, the project in my hands is always growing just a little. In this way, each project, each tiniest of stitches, is an outpouring of my heart. For when I make, I am really coming home to myself.
So the wool I'm spinning with today is a beautiful blend of the other two Breton sheep breeds. So the first is the Landes de Bretagne, which Land means moorland in French, and it's a sheep that traditionally has lived in the moorlands all over the region. And the other sheep is the Belle Île, or Belle Îloise, and that comes from the island of Belle Île, which in English actually translates as Faroe, or could be translated as Faroe. And I'm spinning it from a commercially carded bat, which came in a big bump of 100 grams, and that I have separated into two and stripped down to make a sort of a sliver. Generally prefer to spin from fibre I've prepared myself, because there's a lot that can be learnt about the wool whilst you're processing it. But I do also like to try as many different breeds of sheep and to support local wool producers in my crafting. So this is an example of some locally produced fibre. It's actually collected by an association called Les Toits en Breton, which means the Breton fleeces, and they work specifically with shepherds and sheep farmers, specialising in these two local breeds, so the Belle Île and the Landes de Bretagne. And they gather their fleeces and then they spin them, or they get them scoured, carded and spun in the centre of France. And they also sell scoured and uncarded fibre and carded bat. I'm spinning in my absolute favourite way, which is long draw, woolen spun. It's how I learnt to spin, actually. Most spinners begin their spinning adventure, I think generally with short draw, which makes a worsted spun yarn. But I learnt to spin from raw fleece because it's all that was on hand, that I scoured and carded myself using dog brushes my first time. It was natural that I would learn to spin woolen spun. And there's lots of things I love about woolen spun, one of which is the wonderful light and airy quality it brings to the yarn. It's very fuzzy and warm because there's lots of air trapped in the fibres. I also find it incredibly relaxing. It's a very slow and meditative process, and I tend to come to the wheel for that. I obviously love to knit with yarn that I've spun, and I generally try to spin intentionally with a firm idea in my head of what I would like the yarn to become, or a particular project in mind, because that just helps to give me a little bit of focus to my spinning. I don't like to spin just willy-nilly. I like to try to be consistent in the diameter, the grist, but I also really value the woolen draw because it's all about letting go. It's about trusting your fingers, trusting the wool, trusting the twist that's going in. In order for the yarn, the finished yarn, to be light and fluffy, you have to allow twist from the wheel to run all the way up the attenuated fibres into the unspun yarn at the end. And although you can see me just lightly pinching here, I could actually spin unsupported, which for me is a real goal when I spin. It also requires me to hold the carded fibre with the absolute lightest of touches. Which again, I find incredibly meditative. Summer is just round the corner and solstice will soon be here, which for me really seems to signal the start of the spinning season for me. I know a lot of spinners tend to pack up their wheels in the summertime. They prefer to spin by the fire through the long winters, and that is obviously lovely and cosy to do. But perhaps it's because I first learnt to spin at the end of the spring, and then by the summer was really starting to find my feet. Or perhaps it's because as well, although many of the crafts I practice require quietness and sitting, I love to practice them outside. And for me, there's absolutely nothing better than taking my reel outside in the garden in the evening and spinning until the sun goes down. Or my absolute ultimate is to go outside with my spindle, my French spindle, which is a supported spindle, and my distaff, and to spin and walk. I love that. There's nothing quite like spinning in the open air, and particularly to spin in the landscape where that wool has come from.
After a long, dark, cold and wet winter, summer is finally here. The neighbours' cows have come back to graze on the paddock beyond our apple tree. They keep us company while we're out in our garden, working or playing. There are flowers everywhere, in the fields, in the woods, in the garden. A couple of weeks ago, we picked elderflowers and made cordial, intending to keep the bottles for the winter. But it was so delicious, we couldn't help ourselves, and we're already down to our last bottle. Out in our vegetable garden, we're already starting to enjoy our first, very humble harvests. The pickings may be meagre, but the satisfaction is enormous. After a long, dark, cold and wet winter in this often uncomfortable house, the return of the sun and the longer days makes us warm and in the mood for celebration. So much life has happened since we last celebrated the summer solstice as a little family. So many hard moments, so many sorrows, but also so many joys. We treasure these quiet moments of celebration, making cakes, gathering flowers, decorating the table, celebrating our life together, the ups and the downs, the tears and the laughter, the joys and the sorrows. The sun has returned, and it's time to dust off my spindle and distaff and take my woolwork outside in the fresh air. At this time of year, there's nothing better than to sit out in the garden once our little boy is in bed, watch the swallows flying overhead in and out of the barn, and spin as the sun goes down. This was the first episode of the Woollen Hearted Podcast. The music used was A Day to Remember and Tomorrow by Ben Sound, available at www.bensound.com. A big thank you to my family who helped me in all things, big and small. And a very big thank you to you for being here with me. I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Until then, you can find me online at www.woollenhearted.com and at Woollen Hearted on Instagram.
Dans quelques minutes, le groupement des éleveurs de moutons de Ouessant va vous proposer aussi de vous donner quelques conseils pour héberger un mouton chez soi, si l'envie vous prend un jour de devenir éleveur amateur dans un premier temps. Voilà, j'ai l'idée aussi de pouvoir vous expliquer un peu la démarche à suivre.